All right. Awesome. Well, like I said, I'm excited to see all your faces. For those of you that have just been popping in, feel free to drop in the chat just who you are, where you're from, and what you do. Um, and if you're open to it, would love to see your faces. Again, I realize it's towards that lunch hour, so if you're multitasking, that's totally fine as well. But really, at the end of the day, you know you have better things you could be doing, and so I want to make sure that you're able to really sitting here with some intention to take action. And that I hope you're here because you want to learn some powerful things and some things you can take action on right away. So let's start with what might be a familiar feeling. You've set a goal, you've poured your energy into it, and you finally crossed the finish line. But instead of feeling proud, you're already thinking about what's next or what could have been done differently. Or maybe this, you've revised an email 5 times before hitting send, and you rework the slide deck late into the night, even though it was probably already pretty solid. You hit every target, but you're still wondering, is it good enough? These aren't just habits of hard workers, they're signals of something deeper. High achievers often aim for excellence. But that perfectionism tendency comes in when we start to try to chase approval, control, or have that fear of being wrong. And the difference is one builds confidence and the other erodes it. And so today's session is all about the shift that separates healthy ambition from that perfectionist pressure. And the shift that helps you lead and perform with clarity instead of burnout. So we're going to talk about, is it excellence or a moving target? You'll learn how to define what is good enough actually looks like and avoid some common mistakes. We'll also examine the expectations you place on yourself and whether they're guiding you or controlling you. And then lastly, you'll discover how to lead more courageously by shifting from perfectionism to internal progress and intentional progress. So I don't have a magic wand where we're going to solve all of this in 30 minutes, but you will walk away with some action steps that you can go out and apply. And then at the end, we'll leave some time for Q&A, and I'll share a bonus offer if that's something that you want to keep working on. But before we jump in, here's a little bit about why this session was created. So through registration, through my work with clients, I've heard many things like, I feel really mentally drained even after a win. Or I'm accomplishing a lot, but I rarely feel accomplished. Sometimes it shows up as I really stop to reflect. It's straight from one deadline to the next. And lastly, is I've heard things like, I've checked all of the boxes, but I'm still wondering what's the point if it never really feels like enough. Can anyone resonate with any of those? Yeah, some head nods. And feel free if there's any others that come up for you to share those in the chat as well. So as I mentioned, my name is Caitlin. I specialize in helping professionals, especially women, develop confidence, clarity, and presence to lead themselves and others with intention. So why this topic? I have personally been that person who hit a goal and immediately was on to the next. And I know what it's like to push yourself with high standards and to genuinely want to do great work, but to feel like it's never enough. Earlier this week, I was talking to a client who finally let herself feel proud of a win instead of just brushing it off like it's no big deal. And that really is the goal, not perfection, but progress, and helping you release the pressure that so often we place on ourselves. So whether you're here to improve how you lead, set goals, or just feel less stuck, I'm glad that you're here. So let's start to break this down together. Striving for excellence often looks like triple checking your work, right? Setting those high standards and kind of constantly asking, could this be better? Where can I improve? But there is that fine line between being a high achiever and falling into the perfectionism trap. And perfectionism often wears that clever disguise. It tells you that you're being responsible, you care deeply, and that those high standards make you excellent. And while high standards can absolutely support your growth, perfectionism can slowly start to sabotage it. So, what's the difference between the two? High standards say, let's challenge ourselves and grow. Whereas perfectionism says, you're only good enough if you get this right. You're only good enough if this is flawless. High standards guide you, whereas perfectionism governs you. And the longer perfectionism leads, the more it starts to erode your confidence, even after your best efforts. You might notice perfectionism showing up if your energy is drained trying to meet expectations, or you delay action because it never feels ready, or you spiral in doubt even after a win. So here's the shift. You don't become a confident leader by perfecting every move. You build it by taking action, reflecting on what worked, and learning forward. That progress builds trust, whereas perfectionism just keeps moving the target. Letting go of that perfectionism doesn't mean lowering the bar. It just means choosing progress over pressure, choosing courage over control, and redefining what success looks like on your terms. So let's explore the biggest mindset trap that high achievers really consistently fall into. And that's going to be moving the bar. So often when I work with people, they set out to accomplish a goal, then they achieve it, and then they just keep going. And that's where we really start to question, okay, is this excellence or is this a moving target? And so think of this. Reflect on what felt like a win 3 months ago. It could have been taking on additional responsibilities. It could have been starting an internship or getting ready to start an internship, taking the lead on a project, learning you're in the queue for a promotion. Think through that. And then consider what would that same result feel like a win today? A lot of times what I hear from high achievers is the answer is no. And if you're sitting there kind of being like, yeah, that's me. You're not alone. And that is one of the sneakiest forms of perfectionism. Because as high achievers, we're so focused on growth. And often when you hit that goal, instead of celebrating the win, your brain just moves the target. And you say, that was fine, but I could have done better. Or if I want to stay ahead, I need to push harder for next time. Or, well, anyone could have done that, right? I hear that one all the time. Well, this is just status quo. Anybody could do this. So the goalpost shifts, and then suddenly what felt like progress now just feels like you're keeping up. So we start measuring ourselves against a moving definition of success, one that we might not actually agree to, but we feel the pressure to chase. And that cost chips away at your confidence. It really creates a cycle of achievement without fulfillment, and it keeps you from acknowledging how far you've come. And so this shift, the one thing to put into action is to start with defining what does good enough mean for this project, this conversation, or this moment. And you want to define what good enough looks like ahead of time when you get started. You want to write it down, say it out loud, and use that as your benchmark, not your inner critic. Because when we don't define success up front, our brain is just going to fill in the blank with more. and we end up exhausted, chasing a finish line that keeps moving. But when we do define it, we reclaim control and we make that intentional progress when you can actually give yourself permission to feel successful, not just busy. So your key takeaway here is before starting something new, pause and define what good enough actually looks like. So if you have ever found yourself moving the goalpost on yourself, chances are you've also absorbed some invisible expectations along the way. Some of those expectations push us to grow and be better. Others are quietly running the show, shaping how we show up, what we say yes to, and how we measure our worth. These rules or expectations sometimes sound like I should be farther along by now. If I'm not the one fixing it, I'm failing as a team member, or I can't speak up unless I have the right answer. But the thing is, these aren't high standards. These are invisible rules that we follow out of fear, not clarity. And so often they keep us chasing approval, avoiding mistakes, and tying our worth to how productive we are. So, we're going to do a quick standards check. Every expectation you place on yourself falls into one of two categories. The first category is aligned. Aligned expectations are rooted in your values. They challenge you to grow and support who you are and who you want to become. So what would an example of that look like? I prepare for meetings so that I can contribute with clarity and confidence. I take ownership of my mistakes and use them to move forward. Or I speak up when I have an idea, even if it feels uncomfortable. Those things support strong communication and respect for others. They're rooted in growth and personal responsibility and built on courage, not ego. Whereas the second category is controlling. And the controlling expectations, those are rooted in fear, people-pleasing, or perfectionism. They're going to create pressure and drain your energy. More often, we operate from statements like, I shouldn't speak up, or I can't speak up until I have all of the answers. Or if I don't respond immediately, people will think I'm unreliable. I shouldn't delegate because it won't get done the right way. Or if I'm not one step ahead, I'm going to fall behind. Has anybody ever fallen into the controlling expectation trap? Yeah. It just kind of becomes that rat race of like, yeah, I've got to keep up. And as the last one says, of like, if I'm not ahead, I'm behind. Which again, there's value in being prepared. There's value in being thoughtful. But when it's coming from more of that negative place, as all of you probably have experienced in some way, it does start to drain your energy. You feel stuck. You feel like you are losing control. You're losing your power. And that's really not a fun place to be, right? So how do we make this tangible? I want you to think of an internal expectation that you operate by. This could be in how you communicate at work, show up in a relationship, or just move throughout the day. And so take a second. Does everybody have something? You can even use one of the examples if one of them really did resonate. And ask yourself, really, where does this expectation come from? Is it helping me become more of who I want to be? Or is it just keeping me in check? And lastly, does it create peace or pressure? While some pressure is healthy, if it's creating more pressure or fear, it might fall into that controlling standard. Sometimes the expectation to feel like the expectations that feel like they're motivating to us, they're actually mechanisms for avoiding criticism, failure, or feeling not enough. But the good news is that with awareness, that it starts with awareness, and with that awareness, you can start to rewrite it. So let's look back at one of our previous examples of if I don't respond immediately, people will think I'm unreliable. This, I think, especially if you were in COVID, there was this pressure of having to be on all the time. It's being monitored by, are you online? Which I'm sure everybody still wants to make sure you're working. However, the assumption of people will think I'm unreliable, despite this example seeming well-intended, the standard is likely rooted in fear. It's driven by a fear of potentially being judged or misunderstood, not your actual reliability. And it's also a pressure to react, not respond. And it assumes that people are constantly evaluating you and that people are, always watching, judging, or drawing conclusions on your action. And lastly, it reinforces people pleasing over boundaries. That underlying message is I need to meet your needs immediately so that you don't think less of me, which can lead to burnout, blurred boundaries, and misaligned priorities. Anyone feel a little seen in that? Yeah, I've been there too. So what would an aligned reframe look like? It could look like I communicate clearly and follow through in a timely, thoughtful way. The difference, this is committed to excellence, but is based on intention, self-trust, and respect for your time and others' time. It gives you permission and room to pause, prioritize, and lead from clarity, not fear. If you feel the pressure of your own expectations or high standards, an action step could be to revisit those expectations and really start to identify, are these aligned or are they controlled? And our third and final step. So let's talk about how we can, keep those high standards and stay focused on growth and progress without necessarily falling back into that trap of perfectionism. Because the truth is, it's not just about how you perform. It's also about how you process what you've done. And often, perfectionism shows up after the fact. After you finish that meeting or submit the project or have a tough conversation and you start spiraling. Especially when it comes to tough conversations, I always like to call that kind of that outspoken hangover of just you're replaying it and it's draining your time, it's taking up space. And you're wondering, why didn't I say that better? Or that could have been stronger. Or I should have done more, or said that differently. And suddenly, what maybe felt like a meaningful step forward feels like a missed opportunity. And that's not growth anymore, that's not judgment. And so instead of tearing yourself apart, I want you to try a different reflection method. And it's one I use with clients all the time. That's called the LBs and the NTs. So LBs is like best. What did I like best from this situation? So after you finish a project, a meeting, or a decision, what did I like best? What worked? What would I want to replicate next time? NTs is next time. So what would I do next time? What would I want to try differently next time? This is about reinforcing that progress, reinforcing the progress that perfectionism tries to ignore. And this framework of LBs and NTs focuses on learning, not judgment. You're not asking, did I do it perfectly? Did I get it 100% right? You're not operating in that world of absolutes or black and whites. Rather, it allows you to reflect on what you moved forward and what you would adjust moving to keep growing. This is how you keep your standards high and have a healthy mindset. And it builds your ability to evaluate without overanalyzing, and to grow without spiraling, and to lead with intention, not fear. So your action step here is to use the LBs and the NTs method to reinforce progress and reframe missteps as learning moments, not proof that you're falling short. Growth comes from the reflection, refinement, and courage to keep showing up. So let's start to bring it all together. In 30 minutes, we covered a few different concepts, but I want to leave you with this. Perfectionism might look like high standards, but it often leads to pressure, procrastination, and burnout. So first, we talked about defining what good enough looks like before you start. And this is how high achievers help to avoid moving those goalposts on themselves. Set those clear expectations for yourself up front. You can make room and space for progress, not perfection along the way. Second, we explored our internal standards. Not all of them are helpful. We've absorbed and picked them up from friends, family, different experiences that we've had. Some of them are rooted in our growth and our values, and that's what we call aligned. And others, those are the ones that are rooted in the fear, the people pleasing, or the pressure. And that's really where you need to pause, reflect, and choose which is guiding you versus which is governing you. And then finally, we wrap up with the reflection. The LBs and the NTs method is a simple way to process your work with intention instead of judgment. It shows, it helps you own what's working and reframe those missteps as part of your growth, not signs that you're falling short. Letting go of perfectionism isn't about lowering your standards. It's about choosing progress over pressure and leading from intention, not insecurity. Alrighty, so who feels that this was actionable and helpful? Thoughts are stronger when shared, so feel free to either come off mute or drop any of your takeaways in the chat. And as I mentioned, I'm offering a free gift today. I will talk about it and I'll send it in the follow-up. But if you are wondering if today's session helped you recognize a few patterns or blind spots and you're wondering, okay, this is great, but like now what? The good news is I'm not going to just leave you hanging. I'm offering a 20-minute personalized implementation call where we'll help you address one of your unique challenges, and I'll provide some recommendations on how you can start shifting some of those perfectionism tendencies so that you can start showing up with intention. And so that's one option that will be in the follow-up. And then you can also save the date for our July masterclass, which is happening on July 22nd at 11:30 a.m. And so there are two types of people, and I hope there's ones that are going to take this and run with it and make something of it, and that's amazing. And there's people who want a little extra support. And so if that's you, again, definitely leverage that 20-minute call where we'll give you some personalized recommendations. Otherwise, I hope that you take this and you use it. And with that, we will wrap up, and I'll stay on for a couple of questions, and trust me, what's personal is universal. So if something comes up for you, you're not the only one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ella.
This was great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elise.